This is Eileen Griffin with the Heartland View from the Heartland Daily News, bringing you information and analysis about public policy stories affecting your life, your health, your freedom, and the nation's economy. This week we're going to cover several stories about your life, and we're going to cover it in terms of people behaving badly. People behaving badly and impacting the lives of everyday Americans. And everyday Americans just doing everyday things like going to work. So for example, our first story is reported by Chad Wolf. You might recall he was the acting Secretary of Department of Homeland Security during the Trump administration. And he shares his story of what he had to deal with when people were behaving badly in his neighborhood. So he has a home, obviously, and a family, he has children, and people disagreed with how he did his job, apparently. People can have disagreements with him. And of course, there was so much negativity during the whole Trump administration against anybody that worked in the Trump administration. No lack of understanding why Mr. Wolf was targeted. But they went to his home. So instead of disagreeing with him in a public space or, on social media, or even if they wanted to protesting out in front of the office building. Instead, they went to his home. That is behaving badly. So people in the neighborhood were disrupted, streets were disrupted, traffic was disrupted, his family was disrupted, all because people disagreed with the Trump administration policies and the job that he had to do. That's the job he was hired to do, and that's what he did. So people going to his home, and that should never be allowed. But it's happening more and more. These people are pushing beyond just disagreement, beyond just disagreeing with a person in their job and in their career, and taking it to their home. And this is out of bounds. And it's growing, it's expanding. People shouldn't have to put up with that. People behaving badly. Now, there's other areas where you see people behaving badly. Let's talk about student loan debt. So there's an article written on the Heartland Daily News about this national catastrophe, student loan debt. How did it become a national catastrophe? People want to go to college, they take out loans. Why is it a catastrophe? Well, because they're not paying it back. So that's the problem. So student loan debt now exceeds $1.6 trillion, and it continues to grow. Now, the higher education editor for the School Reform News at Heartland Daily Institute, Jane Shaw Stroop, she said the following, quote, "It's a grim story and in many ways familiar. A long, slow process by which politicians, government bureaucrats, and private businesses pursued their narrow interests while failing to acknowledge the logic and warnings that foretold disaster. Supporting it all was the public, ignorant of the details but eager to send their children to college." End quote. Now she compared this to the story of the bootleggers and the Baptists, how different divergent groups end up on the same side because of their own narrow special interests. So how did this happen? Well, you've got colleges, they want to make more money, they want more students. They're making more money because they can continue to increase the costs because the loans are available to fund the students going to school. Parents still want their children to go to school. They understand the value of a college education, so they're still in the mix. And then, of course, government gets involved. Now, government backs up some of the loans. I mean, when that happens, when a government backs a loan, well, that means a bank or credit union is pretty much off the hook. So it's risk-free because it's backed by the government. So who then is on the hook for that loan? Once again, it's the taxpayer. So this is people behaving badly. If you take out a loan, any student should take out a loan with the expectation of paying it back. It's an agreement. And so there's an analysis, the risk-reward analysis of how much am I going to anticipate making from my career, or what's the benefit of this education I'm gaining, how am I going to pay this back? And can measure it with how much do I think I can afford on a monthly basis in terms of a loan. And maybe there's different ways to do it. Maybe you do partial loans, in some cases you pay through a job. There's different ways to do things. But the behaving badly part comes when people now deliberately say, I do not want to pay back this loan, or I don't think I should have to pay back this loan. And of course, it's aided and abetted by certain political elites as well as mainstream media. And some of the students, they just don't know. They didn't realize how much it was going to cost them to take out this loan. So all of these things come together. But now what the mainstream media and what some in our pop culture and even political elites are encouraging is not to pay the loan back, to just renege on the loan, walk away from it. Oh, the government will pay, taxpayers will pay. Yet another way to divide Americans. So many taxpayers, tax-paying citizens never went to college. Now they're going to be having to supplement people who didn't go to college. It just doesn't make sense. And what about the moral issue? So the moral issue is with any loan, when you accept a loan, you accept the consequences. It's your word. You make the commitment. So anybody that takes a loan, you sign an agreement and you agree to repay the amount that you borrowed with interest. So to renege on that and just to accept that it's okay to not fulfill your agreements, to follow through on commitments, to follow through on your word, be reliable to your word, that's an issue that will impact these young people in many ways throughout their lives. They're basically being trained to behave badly financially. Now, the ultimate in behaving badly, we're going to talk a little bit about crime. So the FBI statistics came out. No surprise to anybody that's paid attention this last year. Of course, crime is on the rise, and it's on the rise dramatically. Why? Well, because there's been a relaxation of rules. There's been a withdrawal. Police officers have been forced to stand down in a lot of cases. You've got a lot of radical district attorneys. And so you see this dramatic increase in crime. There's a rise in violent crime, and the FBI reports also within the property crimes rate, you're talking about 117.5 billion losses in 2020. Now, these same cities with rising crime, they're also the same ones that are defunding and demonizing their police forces in a lot of cases. Now, what does that do? So if you're defunding your police, you're restricting police, you've got people out there who have ill intent. There are people out there determined to behave badly, and in fact, criminally. So there's people with no moral compass or a slightly damaged moral compass. Now, they're not held back by their own morality. They're not held back by their intrinsic motivation. They're held back by deterrence. And that deterrence comes in the form of punishment, and it comes in the form of people being seen on the street, deterrence in the form of law enforcement. So once those things are removed, once you remove the deterrent, you restrict the police officers. You remove the police officers from the street. We basically assume that the law will not be enforced. Radical district attorneys say, we're not going to enforce these crimes. What does that do? Well, that encourages people to behave badly because there's nothing holding them back. And again, we like to think that most people have good intentions, but there are people out there that don't. And that is behaving really badly. And it's getting worse. And Pat Buchanan points us out that this people behaving badly, they're not who we think they are. So the mainstream media and some of our elite politicians are trying to perpetuate this idea that all of this crime is being handled by white supremacists. And even FBI Director Christopher Wray says the biggest problem in this country right now is white supremacists and right-wing terrorists. And that's what we're hearing in the news. But this week's release of the FBI crime data seems to defy a lot of what we're told, a lot of what's happening in mainstream news. And unfortunately, what's very sad is there's so many people that are being killed and it's not being reported accurately. So of the people killed in 2020, at least 9,913 were of African Americans. And that's the FBI data. So 7,029 were considered white, 497 were from other races, and 315 were of unknown race. So there were at least 14,146 men killed and 3,573 women. Now, Pat Buchanan explains that, Black Americans are being shot, stabbed, beaten to death at the rate of 6 to 7 times that of white Americans. And by the end of this year, well over 10,000 Black Americans will have been made the victims of homicide in America. But how many are killed by these white supremacists? How many are killed by this fear of internal terrorists? A lot of cases, they're killed by people behaving badly. In your garden variety criminals, gangs, shootings, criminals, people with ill intent to steal or to do something gang-related or just to perpetuate some kind of evil. So are we going to solve this problem? They're not political activists. These people that are out there shooting, killing, attacking all of these people in America. If they're political activists, if they were from the Proud Boys or some other fringe group, it'll be front page news everywhere. We would all know exactly who it was. But if it's not them, who is it? And why isn't it being reported? The bottom line is these are people behaving badly. And it really doesn't matter who they are. It doesn't matter what their skin color is or their heritage. It matters how they behave, how they function in society. And the tragedy is so many people are being killed needlessly. And what's going to happen if we continue this lawlessness and this lack of enforcement? It encourages more people to behave badly. Crime will continue to rise until people with common sense and compassion for their fellow man, regardless of any of their heritage, background, or anything else, just pure compassion for your fellow man. When you have those people in office, that kind of leadership, you'll see a decrease in crime. That's how we reduce people behaving badly. So that's it. That's this week's report for the Heartland Daily News. Please go look at all of these stories if you'd like the details. There's a lot of statistics from the FBI data. Please go ahead and take a look at that. Otherwise, you can also find information on the Heartland Institute by looking at heartland.org. Thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. Have a great week.